I do think for most people, and anybody listening, if you're suffering or struggling with your mental health, it's kind of time not to give a shit about what anyone else thinks.
Right.
It
Yeah.
really is. It's really time for you to look in the mirror and be kind to yourself and give yourself the care that you would recommend to anyone else. Hey, you're suffering, you're struggling. I care about you. Let's get some professional help. Or again, one of these tenets is a great place to start, right? If people don't necessarily want to seek out care right away.
Welcome back to the Hefflinger podcast. Tonight we got Dr. Drew Ramsey. He's a board certified psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and author. His work focuses on evidence-based integrative psychiatry, nutritional psychiatry, and male mental health. He founded the Brain Food Clinic, a digital mental health practice, and Spruce Mental Health in Jackson, Wyoming. Using the latest research along with decades of clinical experience, he hopes to help people improve their mental health and build resilient mental fitness. And he also has an upcoming book coming out called Healing the Modern Brain. So we're super excited to have you tonight, Dr. Ramsey, and we're excited to get into the conversation.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a treat to be with both of you. I'm a big fan, so I'm used to seeing the doc on my feet, so it's a real treat to be here with you guys and with everybody who's listening. Hey, I'm excited to get to spend some time with you, talk about mental fitness, and have a great conversation.
Yeah. So you're in New York, right? Are you in New York City?
Well, I was based in New York City, so I'm a farm boy from Indiana, and then moved out for training when I was 26 years old, and really stayed in New York until my mid 40s. Then I moved in with my parents in rural Indiana, where I'm from. But most of my life, I was a New York psychiatrist, then some time in rural Indiana, and now I'm talking to you from Jackson, Wyoming, where we moved about 4 years ago.
Oh, wow. I'm
Nice.
behind the times.
Oh, I'd say that when I finished training in psychiatry, people give you a variety of pieces of advice, good advice on what to do with your career and how to stay sharp, and I got advice that I really liked, which was about being a good therapist and a good psychiatrist. Really, also involved living a vigorous life, experiencing a lot of things, experiencing different cultures, experiencing yourself in different contexts. That really allowed you to be kind of a different level of therapist. So I think part of where I've appreciated getting to be in Manhattan and kind of have conversations around maybe that culture and be oriented there, and then also to be in places like rural Indiana and Wyoming, and to have similar conversations about mental health, but in pretty different contexts.
How did you get interested in psychiatry?
I like dreams a lot. My aunt was a therapist and psychoanalyst. That was really was very, very close with her. She unfortunately passed about a decade ago, but she just loved mental health, and she loved being a clinician. And she would get so kind of intensely focused on patients and their process and their development. And as a young guy in college and then in medical school, it just really kind of struck me. I also have an uncle who's a psychiatrist, so who's a role model. So I think those influences really helped. I don't have other physicians in my family or other mental health people in my family, really. And then I think, like everybody in mental health, I got a little interested just because of my own challenges. Kind of keeping my mood as positive as I would like, especially in kind of college and medical school. I was one of those guys I'd kind of like nod off after lunch more than I'd want. And so I just got really curious on how to take good care of my health and good care of my mental health. And then in medical school, I got into psychotherapy, and I don't know, that just really intrigued me. The idea that a conversation between two people could be really deeply healing, or could reveal something to you about yourself that you didn't know. I think all of that, along with, boy, it seemed to me 25 years ago, things were going to pop when it came to the human brain, that we were just kind of in our first decade back then of having this new set of medications. It seems like something was shifting around stigma and our ability to talk about mental health. Yeah. It seemed like the neuroimaging and the kind of deep biology of the brain was coming online in some way that was, one of the major themes in healing the modern brain is neuroplasticity. And, that didn't exist as a concept when I was in medical school or even residency that much. And And so, I think this mix of it's very probably the most humanistic of the medical specialties. I just really get to sit with patients for hours and hours and hours listening. So I really liked that idea. And then there's all this like new, cool, interesting science about how the brain
Yeah.
works and what it is. And so I think that kind of all informed why I became a psychiatrist.
It's funny when I was training, like we were always taught, brain gets injured, it doesn't regenerate, and that's what the mindset I had. And Julie, my daughter, she went to Ohio State neuroscience program, and she says, "Dad, the research nowadays shows that the brain regenerates itself all the time, neuroplasticity and stuff." And it's like she's teaching me. I said, "Okay, Julie." And then I started reading up on it. It's very, very fascinating.
Yeah, well, I find in psychiatry is also a very hopeful framework and concept to have. I think a lot of mental health is a bummer and framed in a very kind of sad, depressing way. That you've either got bad genes or you had a bad development or trauma, and it's kind of that's it. You're going to have mental health challenges forever. So neuroplasticity is really a lens that allows us to understand, hey, the brain can grow and change. And in that context, we can have symptom reduction and we can understand ourselves better. So I think it's exciting.
For me, what I've noticed, I mean, just growing up in a different era, so many kids or people are put on medications now, and everybody's diagnosed with ADHD and things like that. I mean, what's your take on that? Do you think people are I mean, that's a common question people have is, do you think people are over prescribed medications? Are they over diagnosed, or what's your experience?
Well, I think we're at this really strange period where there are lots of people who aren't getting any treatment for their mental health disorders. They still estimate 80% of men with a diagnosable mental health disorder never get any treatment. And
Wow.
at the same time, everybody's really worried, like, wow, we're treating everybody way too much. I think what we're seeing is there's kind of a misuse. So there are a lot of people who are treated with medications and they don't get better, but they stay on the medications. There are a lot of medications that it's hard to know what we mean when we say they work. Every single person who will take a stimulant medication who thinks they may or may not have ADHD will have, almost everyone, an increase in goal-directed behavior. That's what stimulants do. Some people will really, have no side effects, and so you have a kind of question then clinically where someone's getting more done, they're feeling more confident. Uh, since you kind of universally have that response to stimulants, how do you discern exactly what's a diagnosis, what's somebody functionally getting better? I treat a lot of really complex patients who are on multiple medications. They come to me often having failed multiple medications. And so, with somebody like that, sure, from the outside, you can look in and think, I thought Ramsey was all about lentil. He's got like 7 medications prescribed. From the inside of that treatment, I think we're doing brilliant work. That somebody's really working hard with me to get to a regimen that really controls their symptoms. I think with kids, Brian, it's confusing because, SSRIs, so the class of medications like Prozac, Zoloft, they're about 50-50 efficacy in a lot of childhood mental health disorders. I think it's also important to point out, like, who are we talking about who's not giving out the meds right? Because about 20% of psychiatric medications are actually prescribed by psychiatrists. So I think it's a very nuanced conversation. Like, we don't have enough child psychiatrists so that everybody who has ADHD that's under 18 is going to see a board certified, 8 years of training board child psychiatrist for a stimulant. And at the same time, I don't think we want to shame our colleagues in primary care who meet somebody, does what I think is kind of a bold thing in medicine of saying, hey, we only have a few minutes together in the context of my busy day and your busy day. Here we are. You seem like you're really depressed. It takes me about 90 minutes to have that conversation. And because I'm a psychiatrist, I get it. Right. And at the end of that, I don't always have to prescribe medication because I can have you come back next day, 2 days later, next week. And so sometimes when, the conversation about like overprescribing and misprescribing, and especially in today's kind of environment, right, where there's some notion that we, haven't been paying attention to the risks of psychiatric medications, where psychiatry is exceptionally responsible with that. there's
When I wasn't at all trying to be accused,
I don't hear you as accused.
I was just curious because people.
I think that's
a
out
common
there.
thing. It's definitely out
It's a
there.
common thing. I don't think it's an accusation for you at all. I think it's a common thing, and I think it's a question people have. And then I think when you see the statistics, right, we went from, I think it was like 8% of adolescents in America had depression when I finished residency in 2004.
Yeah.
That went up a decade later to 14%.
Wow.
Now 20%, 1 in 5 of
That's
our
astounding.
adolescents have clinical depression, right? So then, boom, you have clinical depression. Like, what are we going to do about it? And so, again, for a lot of people where there aren't a lot of health resources, where psychotherapy isn't an option, where you're in a food desert, it makes sense where there's hope that someone is going to be responsive to a medication to help with some symptoms.
Yeah.
I also think it's in some ways where the book comes from. I prescribe lots of medications really whenever appropriate, and I think a medication can help. I'm going to have it on my list of recommendations. I also practice in a way where my job is to give you a menu and to understand, hey, this is what a lot of people do. This is what some people do. This is what the evidence says to do. This is what I hear you saying, you're interested in doing according to your values, and to really kind of create a very personalized treatment plan for somebody. We also don't do a good job stopping psychiatric medications. I give you a little bit of Zoloft, Prozac, Lexapro, and you're a little better in a month.
Or some people sell it and they just take the profit too. Well,
Well,
Kevin, you tell me about that.
I think that only happens with the stimulants. I think the only medicines that really end up with street value are the methamphetamine.
I think he's talking about like in college. Any big college, people will be selling their Adderall or other variations of it around study time. People who are prescribed it. But that happens with anything.
Yeah. I think that some adults are surprised by that, Kevin. There's some people, I think, who have not been to a college dorm room recently or beamed in or had college kids talk to them frankly about the party scene of what's going on or how available some of these things are. And
even high school, it's kind of a huge aspect of ever since my brother died of when we discuss things. I think a lot of people are oblivious to drinking in high school. And we just talked with Stacy Stewart the other day. We did a podcast with her, and she's the CEO of MAD. We met her last year. And there's like a statistic out there of the amount of 8th graders that have tried alcohol is 20 to 30%. So it's not all these things are happening. I think it's sometimes easy to forget when you were younger and doing stuff, and it kind of all evolves. So
I think that the bottom line is adults and adolescents are facing a lot of options, and I also think a lot of a mix of like misinformation, right, ranging that like the meds don't work or they're toxic, to just that normal question of like, like we have a lot of folks taking meds. And I think that's also coupled with, we have more people taking psychiatric medications than ever before. And at the same time, our mental health crisis is as bad as it's ever been. So how do we put those together and not end up like stigmatizing people, not end up making meds inaccessible or fear mongering? It's a big question.
Well, I think what's happening too is I think mental health is becoming definitely more mainstream, and people don't see. It's becoming a more normal word to hear mental health, and the stigmatism is going away a little bit.
I think that's exactly right. I think there's less stigma, there's more awareness, and that's certainly some of what we're seeing in an uptick, right? If I'm a man today and I'm feeling down, sad, tearful, suicidal, irritable, I don't have an appetite or I'm right? Most people know, hey, I've just met criteria for major depressive disorder. And there's a lot of different things to do about that. I can go on to Instagram and put hashtag male depression and suddenly, kind of see other men, influencers, people in the space talking about this issue. Yeah. So I think there's less stigma. I think it's still hard to go get treatment.
Yeah.
I'm about as like fun and friendly as it gets as a psychiatrist. And but people still, it's hard to come and see me.
Yeah. And, you're vulnerable. You're most vulnerable when people come to see you. I think they have the impression that they're giving away all their secrets and all their vulnerability and looking weak. And well, it's got to be a tightrope to walk when you're talking to people.
I think a lot of people, it's you don't wanting or thinking you need help or admitting that that's somehow a negative versus a positive. I think is a huge, at least in my peer group, around what I see.
Okay, when you're seeing this in younger men, that there's a little bit more of somebody's like, hey, I'm getting help, a little more positivity around that.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that I think that's what stops a lot of people. Like if you even there's certain friends I'll talk to, and you can have kind of be emotional. You can share some of that. Some people that's not really the conversations. They'll never go. It never goes beyond into those really deep sharing their emotions. What I've always noticed in different groups, it's interesting to see. But I think it's definitely more progressed probably versus the generations above me of the amount of people that are willing to do that.
I mean, I think things have shifted. There's a lot of like traditional male activities like hunting and fishing and, going out on the canoe together that I think often get discounted, is how meaningful and kind of deep those experiences can be, especially when I think they're done right, when it's not just about like getting wasted outdoors, but
Yeah.
actually, about the experience and about the relationships, about the craft. Um, but yeah, there's definitely a shift going on. Certainly in a male mental health, there's more conversation than there's ever been. I've been really delighted to get to work with Men's Health Magazine and my friend Greg Scott Brown at talking explicitly about male mental health. That's just been, I think, really well, it's been eye opening to me on the things that get talked about and don't get talked about.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, I think would be very interesting to the audience is a lot of people really want to know what's healthy for them and foods. And your upcoming book sounds like it's going to touch on a lot of this. But brain health. I remember when we did what was it called, Kevin? The program we went to with Jim Quick, Mind
Oh,
Valley.
yeah.
Yeah, and so Jim Quick is a brain. He works on
I
brain.
know Jim. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. I love listening to him. So we started, really doing his things and trying to help our memory. And I'd go in the operating room and we'd build these elaborate stories and talk them back to the nurses so we remember all the stuff we could never do. It's fascinating. But he talks about brain, what are the top foods for your brain. I think everybody out there would be fascinated to hear what you think maybe the top foods are for brain health.
Yeah, for sure, Brian. Well, thank you. People know me before this book. My work has been really in nutritional psychiatry. My last book,
Uh-huh.
Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety. I have a nutritional psychiatry cookbook called Eat Complete. Nutritional psychiatry is simply about looking at nutrition through the lens of mental health, right? If we were going to pick certain foods that would be best for our brain health and mental health, what would they be?
Yeah.
And you see, there's a certain set of nutrients that just matters more for mental health. We created a researcher, a friend, Laura LaChance, and I created a antidepressant food scale, which is published. It's open source. We went into literature and asked science basically, hey, which nutrients matter the most for clinical depression? We found there were 12, and then created a nutrient profiling system that said, what natural foods have the most of these 12 nutrients? And the nutrients are, the usual suspects, right? B vitamins, B12,
Right.
B9, B6, iron, magnesium, zinc, selenium, things that we know are really, when you're low in it, your mental health is going to suffer. What we found is interesting. There's definitely the top foods, but this work kind of had me shift my focus a little bit to food categories. At that time, I was selling a lot of kale. I was like launched National Kale Day. I don't know if I was selling any kale, but I was pitching a lot of kale. I wrote a kale mental health sex book called 50 Shades of Kale.
Yeah,
And so
Heck
I was
yeah.
deep in the kale movement. But what I'd understood is, it probably doesn't really matter whether you eat kale or not. What matters is if you eat in the food category of leafy greens,
Yeah.
whether it's bok choy or arugula or spinach or microgreens. And all of the greens have a tremendous amount of what's called nutrient density. You just get more nutrients per calorie, right? Because most of greens are water.
Yeah.
And so, for 30 calories, 25 calories for a cup of greens, you get incredible amounts of vitamin A, vitamin K, vitamin C. A cup of kale has more than 100% of your daily need of vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin K,
Wow.
and for less than 30 calories. So in terms of thinking about the top foods for the brain, I have my little rhyme that I share with people where to get started, where the food categories I think are most
This is
important.
good.
Let's
Let's hear it.
hear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, here's the rhyme. Seafood greens, nuts and beans, and a little dark chocolate. And the idea is these are food categories that are bringing, first of all, that most Americans are missing, right? The average American eats 12 pounds of seafood a year, right? Seafood, especially, and it's not the best seafood, right? We eat a lot of fried fish, we eat a lot of shrimp. We think about what are we after? We're after long-chain omega-3 fats, DHA, and EPA. Right? There's just amazing statistics about this, right? If you eat more seafood, right, your hippocampus, your brain is just bigger as you age. There's I think people aren't aware that DHA, the longest chain omega-3 fat, is like a building block for brain cells. So it's kind of wild to think you can have this big, long 22 carbon fat on the end of your fork. You eat it, and it ends up in one of those brain cells that Brian will move out of the way when he cuts out my tumor someday. But
let's hope not.
And so seafood, just great category. Lots, also things that, iodine, for example, not in a lot of foods, lots of it in seafood. So seafood greens, again, we talked a little bit about it, but it's really nutrient dense food. Lots of ways I find to prepare them, and I find people struggle with. I was just having this conversation with Gabe Howard, who's a great mental health advocate and influencer, who's just kind of saying, like, I'm eating my vegetables, but it's boring. And I'm like, wow, what a great clinical opportunity.
So does broccoli fall into that?
Yeah. Well, broccoli is a cruciferous vegetable. So I'd kind of seafood, greens, nuts, and beans. And then I do try to add in rainbow vegetables. So you look at your plate, you see a variety of colors.
Okay.
And then fermented foods, right? This new category of food. When we get back to, so thinking of the healing of the modern brain, I really try to take this food idea. Right? Hey, if we were going to really think about things through the lens of mental health first, right? Your brain's your most important asset. Your neurons are your hungriest cells. Like, is there anything in particular they want? Could we look at that, use that lens to kind of think through some other principles, these tenets, right? That we just kind of understand based on the science and based on our experience and the evidence. It's really, kind of universally good for our mental health, right? You create more deep, meaningful relationships in your life, more connections, as I call them in the book, with individuals and with institutions. It's like the data is very clear. That's great for our mental health, but also we know, right? When it's Friday night, no one's calling. It's like, when, you're getting some texts, some calls, someone says, hey, this week, I want to make sure and see you, but it feels great to us. And so, just like nutrition needed a little bit of an upgrade, right? We need to think through what the brain cells, what the brain actually needs. We need to also look at the new data, right? There are now 7 randomized clinical trials showing that a Mediterranean style diet added on to care as usual can help up to a third of patients achieve full remission in clinical depression.
Wow.
That's like, wow, that was like super cool. But, a lot of people don't know those studies, haven't heard of that study, haven't gotten that kind of encouragement, so there's, I hope a hopeful message for healing the modern brain, that there's a lot of deep science of how we can pull these levers to get more brain growth and repair, decrease inflammation, improve our microbiome, and kind of have more of a structure around caring for our mental health.
Yeah. And it's never too late to start, right? I mean, I think a lot of people think, well, I've eaten, bad all along, just can't, what does it matter now? But
I guess, I think that, I'm in the field of like change, right? I meet people a lot of times when they're ready to make a change. And so I don't think it's too late. I had I have a lot of favorite. I can't say favorite patient just because I work with lots of individuals and I don't know, there's somebody who has that, but there's some individuals I worked with for a very long time at this point in my career. I've been in clinical practice for over 20 years, and I have a couple of patients who've been with me for almost all of it. And one of them is in her 70s. And to answer your question, in her 70s, this woman did her first pull-up.
That's awesome.
Nice.
I talked to her this week. She said, "You know what I'm into now?" I said, "What?" She says, "Well, I get on the treadmill and I run as fast as I can for as long as I can."
She's checking her VO2 max.
This is 76. And then I take a break and I walk until I can start running as fast as I can again. And she sort of like created high intensity training for herself. It's just wonderful. But in terms of like when, I hope that people do something based on this conversation today. whether I didn't also say one of the other brain power foods, lentils, and pesto. I love those too. But, besides, you're going to eat dinner or lunch today or tonight. There are foods that we've just talked about that you can put on your plate. You can pick, you can add another vegetable. You can choose some water or iced tea instead of soda. And there's lots of little things that can be done.
Yeah. And I'm sure people want to hear about the chocolate.
The dark chocolate. So dark chocolate's, again, one of those shifts in nutritional psychiatry is asking us to take a step back from this modern food framework that food is calories that you should feel guilty about, and be in this kind of perpetual cycle of eating too much, wanting to lose weight, feeling badly, and then getting kind of seduced by all the deliciousness. And instead to think that, things like dark chocolate shouldn't be a guilty treat. Dark chocolate's filled with fiber, filled with magnesium, filled with iron. And the problem with dark chocolate is usually we're not eating dark chocolate, we're eating milk chocolate.
So what percentage does it have to be, the dark chocolate?
I think that's an individual thing. I'm shooting for over 70 in my life, but I think the other thing is the percentage, but what else is in there? You pick up a chocolate bar, some chocolate bars say cacao and sugar. That's it. Yeah. So that's a pretty, that's a very cacao concentrated product. Other things are filled with like nougat and wafers and caramel and sure, it's dark chocolate, but there's no dark chocolate in there. And so but dark chocolate has lots of what's called theobromines in they're naturally stimulating compounds. Caffeine is a theobromine. And I think dark chocolate is one of those foods that has some data behind it, increases blood flow to the brain. There's even a little bit of data around preventing depression. But my hope as a psychiatrist is, again, for people, if you're struggling with sweets, you're struggling with carb craving, to do what we call simple swaps. Right? Where instead of having a big bowl of ice cream at night, you have some squares of dark chocolate, or you have a little sorbet, or you have the bowl of ice cream. You just work on portion control, right?
And I do that. If I'm hungry at night, sometimes I'll get up at 10 or 11, or midnight, I'm hungry. And I go down and, you want to have a bowl of cereal or something, but I'll just have a little yogurt, cottage cheese or yogurt. And, it's not as satisfying, but once I have it, it does the trick and I can go back to sleep,
Yeah, and I think that's also just it's a great example of, again, a simple swap, right? Swapping out a nice whole fat organic grass-fed yogurt, ideally. You're just getting a lot of interesting things nutritionally going on in there. You're getting a fermented food, so you're helping your microbiome. Getting some protein, probably helping you sleep a little better. So
for people out there, so when you say fermented, you're talking about sauerkraut and things like that.
Yeah, or just the yogurt. The yogurt you need is a fermented food. Kefir is another one I love that's in the dairy aisle. Sauerkraut, kimchi. Last night I went to Japanese, had a miso soup. And it's just, again, trying to incorporate those into your diet on a regular basis. Why? Because we have this new thing called the microbiome. These are all the organisms that live in your gut. Lots of wild advice out there about what to do with your microbiome, everything from get a fecal transplant to take probiotics. And, but I like being in the space as the person to recommend food. That, my sense of the microbiome research, and as much as, it's coming out all the time, what I can keep up with, it seems to suggest that, especially over the long term, eating fermented foods and eating more plants, eating more fiber is really what most people should focus on, because the majority of people listening to this who are going to hear this in America didn't meet their daily recommended allowance of fiber. 70% of Americans don't. And like a lot of nutritional problems in America, we don't know where the solution is. We need fiber, we get Metamucil, right? We don't think we need fiber, eat a pear, eat some Brussels sprouts tonight. We don't, put more raspberries in your diet.
Well, I think a huge issue is that, just like medicine, I think health and diet is so personalized for you, your lifestyle, your goals, what you're doing. And so many people, I'll see these things on social media. People will be like, well, I can't eat fruit. It's got sugar in it. That's terrible for me. Right. So then they don't want to eat that. Or they'll look at some people, if I'm working out a lot, I'm going to eat a lot more carbs and I'm feeling my workouts and I'm burning that off. Someone else will be like, that's terrible. Well, everyone has different goals. And I think the fruit one, that annoys me more than anything, because there'll be these people out there that say only eat meat, protein and vegetables, and fruit and any type of sugar. I'm like, all sugars are not created equal. Added sugar versus natural sugars, it's completely different things. And I think that's where there's so much confusion, because there's so many conflicting things on social media.
Yeah, and also what's the number one ingredient in fruit? Water. Right? If you look at things like a watermelon or like
Yeah.
any fruit, it's just when you're going to eat it slowly. To the difference between just worrying about sugars and fruit, all sweet things in nature except for honey and stevia leaf. Anything that's sweet comes with fiber. There isn't
Exactly.
anything that is out there in the natural world that doesn't come with some fiber.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of, I think you're also speaking to the misinformation. I think that, we see it most acutely in the nutrition space, right? Where, people are saying, boy, what's the cause of your mental health disorders, or that you're eating plants, or that you're eating meat, or, and I think, again, as a clinician, to me, what bothers me about this is it ignores what we actually do in clinical practice. Right now, I'm treating vegans, I'm treating carnivores, I'm treating Seventh-day Adventists following a specific diet.
Yeah.
I'm following, wellness super warriors who are trying all of the supplements and the powders, because my job's to be of service to them.
Yeah.
And when I see something that's concerning, or there's something I don't agree with, I try to work that into the conversation for sure. But I also respect the patient autonomy, that people get to make decisions about their health. And my job is to help them make well-informed decisions
Yeah.
according to their values. But to me, it's just mind-blowing how many people feel that they have like the authority, knowledge base, and professional training to make claims about like fruit or
Yeah.
sugar
Well, I
or
think
protein.
like just with food, there's many different, like what you're describing, there's many different ways to achieve your goals. There's not just one set routine. And it's the same thing with fitness. There's many, many ways. If you enjoy playing tennis with your friends and that's going to get you to go be active and move, that's great. That's better than not moving at all. And the same, if you want to be vegan, or you want to eat lots of meat, those are your choices. Then build, the diet around that.
Yeah, I also think that notion of us being a little bit more mindful of caring for our own health. Healing the Modern Brain really asks people to start with a tenet of self-awareness. And if in that process you realize that you're shaming people about their food and lecturing folks, and I think that's an important thing for
Yeah,
people to.
and you have to want to do it. Like, so many people just go to the doctor and want to get on medications. But when my wife's triglycerides and her cholesterol were high, and her blood pressure was high, became a vegan for a year. I did it for like 6 months, but all her numbers came down back to normal, and it really works. But she wanted to do that. She did not want to be on medication. She wanted to be proactive and treat her problems without medications, and it worked.
Well, I think there's balance, and I think also it's where mental health is confusing and hard. I think it's where there's a lot of stigma. I have lots of patients who do it all right, and their depression and anxiety is better treated when they take Prozac or Zoloft.
Yeah,
I don't think about that as a treatment failure. I think about that as treatment.
right.
There's a lot of people there's that attitude like, oh, your depression's so bad you need that, or like, oh, I see this a lot of. We all process these meds differently. So one of you might need 50 milligrams of Zoloft, and you wouldn't get the same blood level as somebody who processes it different. They might need 200. But when people take a dose, they want to know, like, is that a lot?
Yeah.
Or I have patients who go to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist will say, like, oh, does your doctor know you're on so much? And it's
Wow.
just such a stigmatizing thing, right? Because it
Yeah.
makes it sound like,
Yeah.
wow, like there's something really wrong with you. When, again, that's the perception, right? But the reality is, all that's going on is your liver enzyme that processes this drug is more powerful. So we need to give you more of it.
Yeah.
And so, again, there's so much misinformation about mental health. That's where somebody's Healing the Modern Brain came from, of just wanting to take a step back and say, hey, this argument that we're having about like whether antidepressants work or not, or where all the mental health problems are coming from, like I appreciate it, but on a day-to-day level, something has switched.
Yeah.
Something's changed in the last 20 years about our mental health, and we need a different and new framework. Part of what's driving the mental health epidemic is people don't want to get care for mental health disorders, and mental health disorders don't get treated. Another thing that's driving the mental health epidemic is that we wait. People don't want to come and go to therapy. Therapy is hard and expensive. People don't want to take psychiatric medications because of so much stigma. And so there's a way that we kind of suppress and put it off. And then, people kind of wait to rock bottom to come and meet me, a psychiatrist. And it's just like horrible. We don't think about anything in healthcare that way. right? We think about prevention. You have depression in your family. Okay, what should you do differently than somebody who doesn't? You have bipolar disorder in your family. Are there certain foods you should avoid? Yeah, you should avoid meat sticks. Why? The data is kind of clear. People who eat a daily meat stick have a 6 times increased risk of being hospitalized for mania. Should you
What's a
never
meat?
eat
What do you say
a
meat
meat
stick?
stick? Like a preserved meat stick, like
Oh,
jerky,
oh,
like a Slim
pe-
Jim.
wow.
like a
Okay,
Slim Jim.
yeah, yeah.
So, does that mean
Interesting.
you should never eat Slim Jims? No, it doesn't. But it does mean that there are a set of
Yeah.
recommendations or a set of ideas that if you have certain mental health challenges in your family or in your history, that we just want people to be more proactive about, right? If you grew up in a household where there was a lot of discord and drinking and a divorce, right? How you think about your marriage, your connections, your relationships,
Yeah.
it's just really important to unpack that. Otherwise, odds are a lot of us end up replicating the relational patterns that we saw that are unhealthy. So, there's work to be done, I think, and what is good news now is that there's just more evidence, more awareness, more tools than there ever have been before in human history. You want to stop drinking today, right? In any town in America, there's a hotline, there's a crisis line, there's 988 where you can call 988 right now and say, hey, I'm thinking about stopping drinking. I'm not sure what to do. People think 988 is like a crisis suicide line. It definitely works for that. But 988 is also just a number to call when you don't know what to do about your mental health. And you're talking
Yeah.
to a trained professional who say, wow, what a great realization. There's lots of ways to address drinking. Where are you? Let's think about resources in your community. Have you ever tried AA or gone? No. So I'll just say that I think you're highlighting what we're up against, right? We're up against stigma. We're up against some misinformation. We're up against that mental health conditions are challenging. Having pathological depression is all of this stuff is harder. You don't have energy, motivation. You feel irritable. You have a negative outlook on things. You're not fun to be around. You're feeling like maybe killing yourself. I mean, it's the idea of like, hey, let's go dancing and walk in nature. It's like
Yeah.
that can really be off-putting advice if it's not framed correctly. The
Yeah.
idea that in your weekly kind of schedule and in your mindset is time in nature because it's a really critical piece of your mental health. Or like a lot of my patients, you don't love movement and exercise. So you've got it really scheduled in. You do it with a group, you do it with a trainer because it's non-negotiable. If you don't engage in that, your mental health symptoms are going to be so much worse.
Well, it's interesting. I started watching a documentary with Sanjay Gupta about, work-life balance, but he was in Tokyo for the first episode, and, they have something where you work yourself to death. It's a real thing. It's a cause of death. And that was just what they were doing. They have a place he went to 3 hours away from Tokyo where you go up into the woods and walk, and they have, hot springs. And so many people do that because it really brings down their blood pressure. They check all their numbers when they're there and blood work. And so it's just one of those hot spots in the world where it's crazy how many hours people work in Tokyo
Yeah.
and the stress that they're under. And then this is an outlet to get into nature.
When I was living in New York, Central Park became just such a huge piece of my mental health. I'd leave the office usually late at night when I was a younger psychiatrist, and I write about this in Healing the Modern Brain. And some days, I'd be able to kind of do most of a Central Park loop on my bike on my way home, and it was just such a gift of movement, of being out in the city, of being in the kind of nature almost by yourself at night in the park.
Yeah.
It's just, I love this story. Sanjay's done great work talking about longevity, but also I think just alerting us more. A colleague of yours is a neurosurgeon, but alerting us all more to ways that we can care for our brain and for our health.
Yeah.
And in Healing the Modern Brain, I go over some of the statistics, right, where the majority of people are going to have sedentary jobs. Things like 80% of jobs are now sedentary, right? So we've had this massive shift of where we had a lot of people who were moving their bodies and, involved in physical labor throughout the day, and not so much anymore. And thinking about, again, these shifts in the modern world that we have to address because they erode our mental health. It's like non-negotiable at this point.
Yeah. What do you have any just basic statistics people would be interested? I think so. If you have a family history of major depression or anxiety, how do you counsel people? Do you talk to them about that? Does it put them in a certain increased risk that they will
Yeah,
develop depression because they have a family history of, or a genetic predisposition? I mean, do people get gene tested for depression and anxiety? And
yeah, we don't have exact diagnostic gene tests right now. There are a lot of genetic tests of mental health that are being advertised, and currently the majority of that is probably pretty fraudulent behavior. That really the only thing that you can see in genetics right now that's clear, at least per my knowledge base, is around the how our body, how our liver enzymes process the medications.
Mhm.
There are a few other things you can learn, like you can look and see what type of BDNF gene you have, and there are certain variants. BDNF is our main growth hormone. There are certain variants that you can have of BDNF. It doesn't translate to a lot of actionable clinical steps. Probably the best example of this is the MTHFR debacle, right? MTHFR is methyl tetrahydrogenol reductase, and it's what
We'll take your word
takes.
for it.
That was close. It takes vitamin B9 folate, right, and turns it into L-methylfolate. L-methylfolate is the version of folate we transport into the brain. And so this seemed like an easy home run maybe 15 years ago. You've got two, we call them bad versions of MTHFR, meaning you make less L-methylfolate, so you don't get as much folate in your brain. That's bad. So
Yeah.
let's give you L-methylfolate. So, this is a classic story that is just kind of sad. So this B vitamin, L-methylfolate, then gets packaged up by big pharma to the tune of several $100s a month. Lots of people get put on it, and the data shows it doesn't really seem to help. Like one, it helps some patients, but you don't actually need to do this expensive gene test. If people have a high homocysteine, you can put them on L-methylfolate, and then the data doesn't really line up, right? If you have two bad versions of your gene, you should be that much more depressed. That's not what happens. And so I think people are hoping for a really overly reductionistic, overly simplistic version of mental
Yeah.
health. I got this bad gene, and that makes my
Right.
mental health bad. We know that's not how it works. In Healing the Modern Brain, I go deep into epigenetics. Epigenetics is the idea that if your genes are the cards that you get dealt, there's the way that we play. I had a good friend who was a hedge funder. It did not matter what cards he got dealt. He always beat me playing poker. Always. It was like a joke with our friends, just so good with numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think about him with epigenetics, right? With the idea that no matter what he got dealt, he was going to have, like, in this analogy, really healthy long life because he had a set of skills.
Yeah.
And so genetic testing right now, I think for people with very complex mental health disorders where there haven't been answers, I think sometimes it can be of help. I got very concerned about 15, maybe 20 years ago when I did my first genetic tests. And I didn't like the effect it had on the patient-doctor relationship because it wasn't based on truth. I'd ask patients, "Oh, have you had any genetic testing?" And they'd say, "Oh, no. Can you do that?" Yeah, well, why don't we check something here? Well, give me a saliva sample. I'd have a genetic test in 48 hours.
Yeah.
They get the results. Oh my gosh, my dopamine receptor's off. Maybe that's why I can't focus. And these kind of false narratives would get like, oh, I have a bad serotonin receptor gene. Must be why the antidepressants don't work.
It's unfortunate because people focus on whatever you can find on a test or an MRI. If they see something on an MRI, it becomes the focus of their life because they found something.
Yeah,
It's
and
not,
so I
and it's
worried about
sometimes
that.
it's meaningless.
Yeah, and I also worried that people became a narrative of, hey, obviously my depression is so bad. I have all these bad genes.
Yeah. Well, it's a
And so
self-fulfilling prophecy.
a little bit. And then I saw some people, to be honest, where it did help, where they'd say, oh, this really helps me make sense of it. I've got a couple of genetic things going on. But I think the bottom line that I want people to hear is that, if your first steps towards mental health is a lot of testing, a lot of supplements, it's probably not the community-based standard of care right now. And that right now, I think a lot of what's happening is some of the fundamentals are getting missed. We have not had a mental health system that in any way focuses on diet. We've had a mental health system that does a good job delivering psychotherapy. It's just most psychotherapy that's delivered is an evidence-based standard of psychotherapy. And then we're still just fighting a lot of stigma and a lot of misinformation about some of the basics. What I hope Healing the Modern Brain helps is, again, these tenets are really approachable. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can go to therapy, maybe you need meds, maybe you don't. But gosh, I know if you start journaling, the studies say you're going to have like a 23% increase activity in your prefrontal cortex over time. that's because self-reflective activities, whether it's therapy or journaling, studies have shown really help us with this part of our brain that's involved in our executive functioning and our working memory, right? So stuff that if you're struggling with focus, it's not like the top of your list, right? We're going to have another cup of coffee. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think if you have that cup of coffee and you journal, over time, you're really going to help yourself with your mental health.
So it seems like you're really good. You give people a lot of good advice, but maybe folks out there would want to know something personal about you. I know when I'm on call and I see tragedies, people always ask me, how do I compartmentalize the things you see, how you talk to people when someone's dying or you can't save them. And you've doing this for 20 years, have had a lot of people come through your office who probably have had horrible problems that they open up to you only about. And you learn about these tragedies in their life and what they're thinking. How do you deal with that after you're out of office and compartmentalize it when you hear these things people tell you that they don't tell anybody else?
I find it very invigorating in a certain way, that I feel when that happens that I'm fulfilling my purpose. To be very frank, that as is tragic, I hear a lot about a lot of suicidal thoughts and a lot of suicide. I certainly hear about a lot of people who've had extreme loss in their life, whether it's losing a parent early or losing a spouse, or sitting with someone as they're dying. But I wouldn't say I feel invigorated, like I leave the office jumping up and down. Yeah, I'm feeling my purpose, but I feel a real sense of groundedness when I'm hearing those things. I think it's easier now later in my career, just having sat with a lot of this, of needing to be very present with people, and and at the same time needing to be very aware of how individual trauma is. You never want someone, when you're sitting with them and they're sharing something like suicidal thoughts, to have them feel like that's your job. So in terms of how I deal with it, I think I try to have a strong mental fitness program. I mean, first of all, psychiatry, unlike a lot of other fields in medicine, we have a really strong tradition of supervision, meaning that when you're in something complex, hard, that's evoking a lot for you personally. Our work is very emotional, so there'll be times you leave the office and you're just filled with a lot of different feelings. So we utilize a lot of supervision to check in with another clinician. I'm really blessed. I have a great network of psychiatrists.
And do you check in? Do you check in?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I have.
So you guys have come to some agreement that you do that. You check in with each other. It's a great idea.
Well, I think there's that, and I just think it's the nature of the work. The difference in psychiatry is we're the instrument, like you're the scalpel, and so that just comes with a set of emotional costs sometimes, and it's really important for. It's like one of the things we use as clinicians. They talk about our countertransference, and so transference are the feelings that you have towards your clinician. Countertransference are the feelings that clinicians have towards you. So if I'm sitting with you and you sit down in my office and I think you're the coolest person in the world, I'm so excited to work with you, that probably has a little bit meaning. Same thing if you sit down and I really feel uncomfortable, I'm not sure I can help you, right? These are all my reactions to you.
Yeah.
And in psychiatry, we learn to sit with those, to understand there's something profoundly true about them. It might not be exactly what we think at first. And so I think maybe part of what I'm sharing, Brian, is and it doesn't maybe sound very personal so far. I think that,
well, it does. It makes you sound human, because people, I mean, everybody wants to know what goes through other people's minds, and you have a job that has a lot of responsibility for people, and it's just you as the human. It's interesting to hear how you deal with it.
I try to be. I guess I can tell you most recently, what I've been focused on is transitioning home. My new office is reasonably close to my house, and I'm putting in much longer days clinically than I have before, and I can be really depleted. And so I find that for me, really kind of doubling down on my return home into a different role has been very important for me. I find in terms of like dealing with the actual stress, like getting pulled into something like sad, tragic, hard. I don't think I'm giving you. I deal with that by being in it. It's like, and I think it's one of the things about doing a lot of long-term psychotherapy with patients is that emotional process of people popping into your mind, or leaving the office with strong feelings or feeling upset or frustrated about a situation. It's kind of like all we call it, like grist for the mill. It's like all part of it,
Yeah.
and it's really important to pay attention to all of it. I think it also then is important to transition out. That's a harder thing in private practice in psychiatry, because you're kind of on 24/7 call for your patients. There's not any coverage. And so, I don't know, but I don't know, you like get used to that. I think fortunate. I have like a really wonderful group that I get to work with. People really respect my boundaries. When people call me or text me in the middle of the night,
So they do.
it's
Wow.
for a good reason. I pick
Yeah.
up, and that doesn't happen a ton.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, one of the first things I heard you say is having a why. You obviously feel as you're serving your life's purpose, which I think in any field, that's a huge purpose or a huge reason behind like how you can do something, because it's very important to you and it's important to other people.
And I like the idea of there being like a safe, non-judgmental place to talk about things
Mm-hmm.
going on in your mind that you feel upset with, ashamed about. Like the idea that my office gets to be that place is really important to me.
Yeah.
And people are like, what do I talk about? I'm like, this is a place to talk about stuff you can't tell anybody else. If you
Right.
can, and first you should like interrogate me and understand like what's in the way of that.
Yeah.
Like what would it take to have this place feel safe enough that you can actually say anything that comes to mind?
You think has that stigmata changed? I mean, obviously, me growing up, and when you hear a psychiatrist, people think, "Oh, well, you're going there's something wrong with you, and they're going to pull something out of you." But you think the stigmata of people, are they more open now to coming to talk to you in our society, or is it still the same where people are very trepidatious, even when they're in there with you?
I think it's getting better. I think still there's situations like yourself. You're a white male neurosurgeon in your 60s. So the idea that, it sounds great. You're going to hop into therapy, start seeing the local psychiatrist, seems okay. I think you might be kind of worried on how that is perceived potentially, right? Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why are you seeing a psychiatrist? What's going on? Again, I think that shows some of the depth of the stigma, right? Where the idea that like, well, I'm trying to optimize my mental health. I've got a lot of questions. I had a really bad tragedy and trauma. It comes up. I want to talk through it. I want to think about that some.
Yeah.
So I hope that that's stigma free. I think I certainly see a lot more of people kind of stepping into like a radical truth, like, and I think I certainly feel a little bit more encouraged. I see a lot of my colleagues, Jake Goodman's a good example, psychiatry resident, kind of had a platform that blew up in part by him just being honest.
Yeah.
Like I got depressed and I took meds. I mean, that shouldn't be headline news.
My girlfriend's told me before she saw something on social media several years ago and before that she thought she was of the same impression that you shouldn't take any meds if you have mental health issues, until she saw her favorite person that she followed on YouTube or Instagram said that it's something she does and it helps her with her life. And I think that's what's huge, just like sharing medical knowledge when you're an expert or other types of tips or what you're doing. When people share their truths, it gets out to other people, and there's someone else who they see that person and they go, oh, okay, that's not like an abnormal thing.
Right.
It normalizes all these things, and it still takes a long time, but it kind of breaks down that stigma.
Yeah, I hope that people feel more space to kind of do what's right for them. What always bothers me is where I meet people and they've been like tremendously suffering with like, generalized anxiety, or just had a really clear biological depression, and they've tried lots of stuff, but they've never tried, a diet change or an SSRI or psychotherapy, some of the basics that we know help. So, I think there's more opportunity. I still think there's a lot of stigma. I do think for most people, and anybody listening, if you're suffering or struggling with your mental health, it's kind of time not to give a shit about what anyone else thinks.
Right.
It really is. It's really time for you to look in the mirror and be kind to yourself and give yourself the care that you would recommend to anyone else. Hey, you're suffering, you're struggling. I care about you. Let's get some professional help. Or again, one of these tenets is a great place to start, right? If people don't necessarily want to seek out care right away. getting yourself moving more, working on your connections, working on your engagement, kind of thinking about this framework of building mental fitness.
Yeah.
The hope isn't any way to replace treatment. I think my hope is for some people to prevent the need for treatment. I think that's certainly
Yeah.
possible. And I try to line up that argument and the facts behind it and the science behind it really clearly. But also then again, with this notion, hey, the modern world's got more stuff. Like what you're talking about, your girlfriend, like that's never happened before in history, that someone's opinion of medications has been formed by influencers on a video platform and then got changed because a different influencer said, hey, meds help. Right? It's like that's like a wild notion of how people are learning about mental health. But yeah, it's very, there's more opportunity for good information, I think, than ever before.
Yeah, I think a huge thing is talk about this all the time, but social media is so much positive stuff. It's the highlight reel. People share all of that. The more we can share, not the picture perfect stuff, there's times where we've went through a tragedy. My dad's went through multiple in his life, but the tragedy in my life is my brother dying. And there's so many times where you just have shitty days some days, and you can try to do all the good things, work out, journal, meditate, and all these other things. And some days are just bad days, and that's going to happen, and you try to weather through those. But I think it's just so important to share that, there's ups and downs in life, and you're not weird for having any of these thoughts. Almost any thought you have, there's probably another human that's having that thought, probably many humans.
Well, because so many kids see these people on social media and they think they have perfect lives because they portray themselves as having perfect lives, and that's how they think it should be. And God, they're so inferior because their life isn't like that because it's fake.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's certainly there's a clip going around right now, Mr. Beast, the top YouTuber, and essentially talking about how profoundly unhappy he is.
Yeah.
And so what we're up against, what teens and kids are up against, I think is substantial. I think the good news is that there's still wonderful mountains to climb, and there's still people to fall in love with. That hasn't changed that much, and even though there's microplastics floating through all of our brains, we can stop eating as much food from plastic. We can stop heating things up in plastic. That, again, if we approach this through the notion that we have a lot of science, whatever critiques have been about the efficiency of our science system, we have the best scientific research and academic system in the world, period. And because of that, we've been able to rapidly understand things, create new technologies, innovate, and help more people. I think we're struggling in mental health to help as many people as need help. And I hope Healing the Modern Brain is a little piece of that, just like I hope for some patients Eat to Beat depression and anxiety is a little piece of that. Whereas opposed to, I see often happen in the space, right? There's this grand sweeping new technique, new supplement, new medicine, like this is the silver bullet. I feel like a lot of us are really tired of that approach.
Yeah.
And that certainly for certain syndromes and certain symptoms, yes, there are things that are really silver bullets. But as you say, Kevin, even those of us with amazing mental health, fitness, 20 years of therapy, eating all the great food, having lots of success, there's still lots of down days. There's still challenges. There's still fights you have with your parents. I mean, these things happen. The hope, again, is to develop a set of skills, develop a framework, to pay attention to the new science of neuroplasticity and inflammation we've been talking about, and then engage in a set of habits that promote better brain function, better mental health. And, this idea, again, like you can feel it. I talked to somebody today, I was talking to another host, he just started walking 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And he was like, boy, people have told me to do this forever, but then I did it. Now I'm walking an hour a day, and it has like totally changed my life.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, sounds silly, right? But it's not.
It's whatever works. Nothing silly, whatever works for you. That's why you have to try lots of different things. That's why I think too, there's tons of different things, and there's gonna be a combination that works for you and gives you the best chance of feeling good on any given day. And then it's obviously work. I'm completely with you. It's so annoying seeing all of the quick fixes all the time for anything. Like this is the quick fix next. You just got to take this supplement, or you just got to do this thing. It's a process, and I'm a big believer. It's all a journey. I mean, it really is. Of your happiness isn't something you just get. It's something, if you focus on it solely, it's going to be fleeting. It's more setting up the environment and doing all this stuff that kind of creates your surface area of that you enjoy what you're doing, you enjoy your life.
And
So
also, like, there's something limiting, right? This idea that our affect always has to be good and happy and feeling great. Like, it doesn't allow some of the more kind of somber or contemplative or, like moods like bored, to come into play as much, right? We're all supposed
yeah.
to be feeling
Right.
great.
You would think someone's a psycho if they were actually truly like 100% happy all the time, just
Well, I'd say, it's
yippee all the
interesting.
time.
I meet people like that often who, maybe a little bit more positive or try to keep a positive attitude. And, I mean, sometimes, our kind of, how our mood sits, like different kind of characters have, slightly different mood states. There are certainly people who are kind of, feeling really good most of the time and people who aren't. Um, but again, that sense of over time learning more about yourself, your mood regulation, your mood states, what causes those states, what can be done to alleviate those states.
Yeah.
That's really the hope behind this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. It's interesting to know. I mean, we've been through a lot of tragedy in our life, and how does one person pull through a tragedy and another person doesn't? And I don't know if there's something to it. It's just hard to know. But everybody's an individual. Everybody deals with things differently, and it doesn't mean that your way is wrong or right. It's just the way that you deal with it. But there's certainly help out there that can help you deal with it better if you put yourself out there.
I was curious what you all have felt with your family. What has been most effective or helpful?
I know for me, like when Brian died, purpose. I told myself, there's no way I'm going to let my son die and be dragged through the media, but also let him die with no purpose to his life. And so for me, I wanted to create a purpose for his life. And I think we have, and we're still working on it. But, maybe it makes me feel better, but it's done a lot of good for the world too. And we're still working on it. But I think for me, it's purpose driven. I mean, when you have a tragedy in your life, you can do two things. You can give up or you can do something about it. You can take that bad experience and turn it into something positive. And that's what we've tried to do. And it makes you feel good. If you help, I mean, I had a person once, I did a video and I talked about, what was it, Kevin? I forget, but it was about my dad and I forget what it was, but the person had commented back and said that, I watched your video and I was getting ready to kill myself. And after watching how your dad reacted to something, he said, I can never do that to my dad. And for that reason, tonight, I'm not going to kill myself. Now, whether it was true or not, I don't know. But if it was true, how powerful is that for one of your videos, opening up yourself up, being vulnerable like I was, talking about something about my dad, and he's thinking he can never do that to his dad, I mean, it's just, there's a lot of power in your words and your vulnerability and
Yeah, I would echo that. I think purpose and meaning is a huge thing. I think a huge thing is just talking about it. I think when you go through a tragedy, especially I think earlier in life, so many people would kind of always talk to me and feel comfortable opening up to me about things throughout high school, throughout college and beyond, about maybe they might not want to talk with someone else about, if they're having suicidal thoughts or just other things like that. And they knew I was someone they could talk to about it. I think just opening up and sharing that we all go through these tough times, and it's relative to failing a test. For someone, that might be the worst thing ever in their entire life, because that's the worst thing that's happened to them in their life, versus someone else, losing a sibling. And then for another person, there's people who are way worse off. So I think just that relative in trying to connect with people in different ways, that it might be just as painful in the other way. And then comes back to gratitude more than anything. Losing Brian at 15 just really solidified in my mind the importance in life. The most important thing in your life is your relationships. And if you enjoy the people you're around and spend time with and do things, it's more important than anything else. So. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I think it's one of the, I know it's actually one of the reasons that I was having a hard time with a lot of like intrusive thoughts about my kid's mortality. And and being a dad has probably been one of the one of the best things for my mental health, of just a sense of purpose, just I don't know, just a like wild and fun, moving dynamic to be involved with, and just really great feeling. And I've had this like catastrophic fear, and so one of the things that drew me to you, Brian, was uh, um, hearing your eloquence, and I think one of my fears was also that I would be a coward if that happened. I wouldn't actually be able to do anything.
You can't underestimate yourself because you'll do what, you have to be in that position, then you do what you need to do, right?
Yeah, well, I think you both speaking openly about it help in all kinds of ways. I think it's not just lives you save, but also asking people to think about something hard. I had a patient who lost her daughter to suicide. She said to me, one of the hardest parts is everyone comes up and says, "Oh, it's the worst thing that could ever happen to you."
Oh God.
And she says, "Well, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
Like, am I not supposed to ever feel happy again, or what? Am I not supposed to get recover in some way? Like,
I think you have to know that people don't like. I remember when Brian died, all these people came over that day. Like 300 people came through our house because a friend called, said, "Can a few of us come over?" And then before you know it, there's 300 people. But people like my wife says, they bring food and they try to feed you and they do this because they don't know what to do.
they want to do something, right?
They want to do
It's
something, but they don't know what to do, and it's an uncomfortable thing. So when people say, it'll get better, they don't know what to say, and they're not being mean. They really don't know what to say. So that stuff you have to let go over your head. They're just trying to be nice, and I don't ever take offense to people saying, "Find your new normal. You'll be okay." That's fine because they don't understand it.
I think I tell some people at times you just have to be there for the person. There is no right words. There is no right action.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to be there, and that's all you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that question you asked me earlier about like how do you compartmentalize? I think there's something about sitting with having the responsibility to help and fix something, but also not having a pressuredness around fixing. I think that what you're seeing with people like loving you and bringing food and trying to say helpful things, you're kind of seeing in their love, trying to do something that isn't probably possible in that moment, which is to make something like that hurt less.
Yeah.
As I think.
But I think that is tough too. What you were saying with that woman is it's so hard because people are maybe wishing well, but then they're, then that's an extra thing she's got to deal with, being brought up and saying, you just went through something terrible. You don't, thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so so often we're well-meaning and we don't know quite what to do. And what you're talking about, which is being with someone, being there, being in service, not necessarily being so confused that some great thing needs to be done, but they need to be they're not alone.
That was kind of an unlock recently, last couple months for me, is just kind of hearing about that. Is I'm definitely kind of wired in that way that I always, if you are telling me something and venting to me, whether it's a friend, my girlfriend, my mom, or anyone else, I want to help. I want to provide solutions. I'm logical, analytical thinking like that, where I really realized it's like sometimes, hey, I just want to vent. I think it was games people play. I was reading, that's where I was kind of had this insight. I was reading that with one of my friends and we were discussing. I was like, yeah, that's something kind of was a blind spot for me. I was like, I always was trying to provide answers. Some people literally just want to vent to you and just have you kind of agree with them. And I was like, okay, so that's something I had missed in a lot of parts of my life where I'm like, okay, so it's just sit with them and go through the problems. Don't try to sit there and offer solutions.
I think a funny thing too is like the kids know me, like I'm pretty stoic and I don't cry hardly at all, but before Brian, when Brian died, I cried a lot and the kids looked at me, especially my young girls, and said, "Dad, you're crying." And I just told them, I said, "Yes, I'm crying. I mean, Brian just died," but I said, "It's okay. I've learned that it's okay to cry in public. Let people see you crying." Something that I learned from my son, Brian, dying. Because I was never like that. I would, always try to hold it in and stuff like that. So there's certain triggers in your life that, tragedy really changes you and it triggers certain things in your brain that just changes you. I don't know if it rewired me or what. It's very interesting.
Well, I'm sure it rewired some things. It's and it is trauma is so nonlinear too. How it comes up at different times and overwhelms us, as you guys were saying, even with time passing and work people do. But I really appreciate how open you both are about it. I think it's really helpful. As I was sharing it, even before I got to meet you guys a little bit more, I guess this isn't in real life, but, not as a fan of your content, it is very calming and soothing. And also I love the sense of you guys working together, like, kind of father-son team making content and get your wife involved as well. It just really, it's just adds a really nice, wholesome feel to my feed.
Yeah.
One other thing, I know we've going on here, but I just wanted to ask you just first, with all this deep talk we're doing, but what do you like to do for fun? And, it sounds like you like to be outdoors. Just for a few minutes, just to hear what you like to
Yeah,
do.
sure. I'll tell you, for me, fun things usually are outside. Kind of perfect day for me is, I love to start my days with a big cup of coffee and a big chat with my wife. We have a nice ongoing 20 plus year conversation. And so, for fun, yeah, talk to my wife with coffee. I'm really big. I love animals, and so whether for a while I had a horse, now I've got a dog, but I really just enjoy the playfulness and the kind of engagement with animals. I like to get out into the mountains. I live now in Jackson, Wyoming, so it's winter when we're recording. So I really love split boarding, going up the mountain on my board. That I found to be a really just, I don't know, like wonderful headspace for me to get into. I've started, I got obsessed with every house I live in having a sauna about a decade ago.
Love
So
it.
I build a little sauna wherever we live. It's like my nesting. And so usually most nights I'm going to be ending with maybe 30 minutes to an hour, and like 210 is about where my sauna will sit. Pretty comfortably for a while. I guess those sound more mental fitness than just raw fun.
No, but that's, I think that's 100%. When I think about, it's literally the simple things. I love steaming after I work out at the gym. And one day I want to have like a sauna and steam room and like the cold tub.
Oh, you got to get a sauna. It's really easy to build. It's a great father-son do-it-yourself thing, man. You guys
That's
to build a
something that's
nice
perfect.
sauna, get some hot sauna content.
See, I've always had a hot tub. Every house I've ever built.
He loves the hot tub.
So the
Sounds like the hot tub.
But I like saunas. Like when we go to hotels, I go in the saunas, but I just never thought about having one at my house. I don't know.
Have you seen, Brian? Have you seen the Finnish data on the mortality reduction? I mean, it's all over Instagram, but it's also quite interesting data that people using sauna. I think it's more than 3 or 4 times a week have something like a 40% reduced risk.
Well, I know I would do the sauna a lot more. I would do the sauna a lot more than the cold plunge because I love the hot. So is it?
Yeah,
better
me too.
Is it better for you, the sauna?
I think they're different things. I mean, my sense is the sauna, the data is a little stronger. There's more in the kind of heat shock proteins. I think the cold plunging, I haven't been as impressed with the data, especially that, what we hope for in data, right? Shifting from, hey, there's a cool cell mechanism that we're activating, like, okay, versus like, hey, we cold plunged 1,000 people, for several months, and this is what we noticed in terms of specific other markers or diseases. My sense is, both have some benefits. I think the cold plunge, there tends to be more of a kind of anti-inflammatory post-workout, but also I think there's something about like the suffering and the discipline, and that it's short, right? Your cold plunge is like 3 to 4 minutes, and you're in and you're out.
Yeah.
And so, and it's so intense. And so I think people like that, the discipline of it, and then that extreme physiological response to it. Whereas I find the sauna is a little more, everything relaxes. Everybody gets a little like looser, like the convert. If you go into a sauna, have like 3 or 4 people come in. If people start, it's like they're on drugs a little bit. People start like laughing and being silly and, joking around a little more.
So I think there's in there.
Yeah, a little euphoria, I think, goes on with the sauna a bit more.
All right, I'll have to research the sauna.
Well, no, the sauna, the data is pretty compelling on saunas.
I feel like my have fun answer stank there. I like to, I try and play some music, especially I get the family playing some music together. I think that's pretty fun. So
do you snowboard or snow ski, or what do you do?
I'm a snowboarder. I'm a snowboarder.
Okay.
Sure. And then the skinning is where you use what's called a split board.
Yeah, I didn't understand what that was.
A snowboard that breaks in half, and then you switch your bindings so they're more like, you're kind of skinning up, kind of like.
Oh wow!
You have these like sticky. It's like a piece of AstroTurf, basically. Okay. So it'll slide up the mountain, but when the ski gets pulled back, it kind of sticks in the snow. And so you can go up the mountain pretty efficiently, and then you take it apart and put the snowboard back together, and you go down.
Oh, I got you. Okay. All right. Do you slalom ski then?
I don't, I mean, if
you snowboard, you should probably slalom ski, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bad skier, but mostly we mock skiers, snowboarders. It's really, we're a counterculture movement, and skiers tend to be people who are kind of uptight and like uncomfortable boots and have
Wow.
questionable fashion choices on the mountain. Whereas
I,
snowboarders are like
I'll
groovy,
tell you why. I
cool.
mean, slalom is a lot of work. It's
Okay,
more. It exhausts you. Your legs are desperate. But snowboarding,
it's
I like snowboarding. When I was snowboarding, I liked doing it, but I don't do it
yeah,
much anymore.
my brother liked to snowboard. He liked that whole movement of wearing the bright colors and the jacket and
Yeah,
everything.
those are the people that cut you off on the catwalks and almost kill you. Or
see, so
cut a
sounds like a
cut a.
skier.
They cut
Sounds like a
across. They cut
skier,
across the
Brian.
mountain. They cut
Wah
across the
wah
mountain.
wah. Yeah,
What?
yeah, yeah.
You're dangerous out there.
We do. We talk about it's the relationship with the topography that's quite nuanced that skiers miss because they're busy going down. But
No.
at the end of the day, this community is a incredible ski and snowboard community. I mean, the whether it's the Jackson Hole Ski Patrol or a ski patrol over at Snow King, we have the Teton County Search and Rescue. If you come and
Yeah.
visit Teton County, you get hurt, no matter where you are, you will have a set of professionals with
Hmm.
you faster than any. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
amazing
that's
the
awesome.
number of, if you follow their Instagram, the number of saves where it's just everything from stuff that sounds silly, like a woman lost her boot in the snow, but they were so far in that they had to get evacuated,
Oh,
to the real tragedies that happen here a
yeah.
lot. But
Yeah, I've not been to
yeah.
Jackson yet. We've done a lot of skiing out west, but I've never been to Jackson. But
Oh,
that's on our
Brian, you
list.
guys got to come to Jackson. It's one of the
Well,
steepest mountains, certainly one of the crown jewels in the ski resorts of America.
I
You guys
can't
got to
afford it,
come,
Drew. It's too fancy out there.
Brian. You
It's
can
too.
stay with me. I got a buddy pass. I'll get you, and maybe we guys start skinning up. You don't need a lift pass. You can earn your turns and
oh,
get you a
True.
good budget vacation here.
we can force him up. We can whip him into shape. Um, that's what's so cool though is you got I think anywhere out west you got the winter and you can do I think the skiing, snowboarding, that's awesome. But then the warm months, all
Yeah.
the hiking you can do.
That's a real secret. It's funny. I didn't really know about that. There are more tourists that come out here in the summer than there are in the winter. And
That makes sense to me. I
the
think it's more
summers, and I
compelling.
mean, the wildflowers in the mountains, the
Yeah.
hiking, the mountain biking, the stand-up paddleboarding and river. It's really, it's wonderful. So, it's a long-winded answer. Fun. I try to get out and about with other people in
Yeah.
nature with some healthy snacks. That's to
Yeah.
me absolutely fun and wonderful. And then yeah, that's
I love
playing
it.
with my
I
kids,
think that's
playing with my
funny.
Yeah.
dog, and that's my life, guys.
Well, it's certainly been a pleasure meeting you. I enjoyed talking to you thoroughly. I can't wait to read your book. It's going to be awesome because I love all that stuff that you're talking about.
Well, I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you so much for sharing it with your audience and everybody listening. Thanks so much for spending some time with us, thinking about your mental fitness and your mental health. The most important thing for me with these interviews, I'd love it if everybody pre-orders the book and orders the book, etc. But what's really important to me is that you take something from the conversation and you do something in the next couple of days, ideally today. Maybe it's you eat some lentils or some
Yeah.
seaweed or some fermented foods, or maybe you think about someone who has a loss like the three of us have been talking about, and just the importance of talking it through sometime. And you do some sharing with them. Maybe you do some journaling. I don't know what it is, but I hope something that we said today sticks with you a little bit. And then I hope you do that absolutely essential step that we so often miss, where we don't turn awareness into action. And so I hope this leads to some actions for you all in your mental health and mental fitness. And thank you all so much for a great convo.
So it's been a wonderful conversation, and the book we've been talking about, Healing the Modern Brain, it comes out March 25th. It's by Dr. Drew Ramsey with us today, and it'd be awesome if you go check it out. It's right in the video description of the show notes, and hope everyone has a great night.